Hey guys, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and I want to talk to you today about Resident Evil enemies, or more specifically, Resident Evil enemies that kept me up at night more than Ewan scratching at the wall for me to let him out of his cage. It's not going to happen, bud. You know what happens if you don't finish your carrots. Anyway, Resident Evil is pretty much the go-to place for westernized gruesomeness, and throughout the franchise there have been tons of ugly enemies which have been less a face for radio and more a face for a parallel universe radio, because that's how little I want to see them. Now, we've already covered this topic before on a video that you can watch right here, and with the release of Resident Evil 2's Remake, there is no better time to cast out the net and collect in all those fresh nightmares. Now, before we begin, some of these are technically spoilers, as some are bosses, so just be warned, and also just to be perfectly clear, I'm not repeating entries from the previous video, so if you can't see a favourite on here, it's most likely on that one. So let's kick this off. I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 more terrifying Resident Evil monsters that haunted your nightmares. Number 10, SCAGDEAD, Resident Evil Revelations. We kick this list off with a monster that makes me want to, well, just lose my lunch, and would likely turn me into a snack right quick with that large array of teeth and that biological buzzsaw arm. A buzzsaw arm, that alone would be justification for putting it on this list, but one of the worst things about this enemy who crops up in the quite underrated Revelations game is that its human head that sits on its shoulder like a meat parrot is capable of speech. Echoing the last thoughts the host had before it succumbed to its awful fate, the SCAGDEAD is a horrible example of a mutation destroying the subject slowly, and while its brute force and terrifying appendages might be the immediate source of fright, it's the lamenting and woeful final words that spew out that will stick with you after you've bested this beast. Plus, there's also a charming feature that this bugger seems to have, which is to puke up what appears to be biological bear traps, snaring the player and keeping them in place while they get to work on them with that lovely flesh-ripping arm. Charming. Number 9, BANDERSNATCH, Resident Evil Code Veronica. When Dreamcast owners found out that they would be getting an, at the time, exclusive Resident Evil game, many were excited to see what horrors the new hardware would throw up, and Code Veronica did not disappoint with the disgusting, giving us this handsome chap, the Bandersnatch. And while that term might at this time be associated with Netflix and Black Mirror's TV Choose Your Own Adventure, this Bandersnatch had only two outcomes. Either you live to tell the tale, or you get crushed by its massive arm. The backstory to the Bander is actually quite interesting, as they were a cost-effective alternative to the Tyrant models, with the T-Virus just being injected into less than suitable candidates. This is why they carry with them that sickly, jaundiced skin and inconsistent arm length. However, it's the elongated grabber that serves as the Bandersnatch's primary weapon, able to swipe at opponents from far away. It might be weaker than the Tyrant, but ultimately this defect, along with its terrifyingly vacant stare, is able to force the player to adapt to an enemy that reacts to being shot at from afar by lifting them up like a playground bully shaking down a kid for change, except the bully doesn't usually splat their victim on the ground like a bug and crush their head. Well, maybe in Scotland. Number 8, Nyx, Resident Evil Outbreak File Number 2. The Outbreak File spin-off games of the Resident Evil franchise were kind of a mixed bag, a collection of unconnected scenarios which allowed players to select one of 8 survivors and play together whilst online. It was a great idea, but delivered a rough experience in execution. However, one of the very right things outside of the zombie elephants was one of the bosses in Outbreak File Number 2, Nyx. The design of this creature is utterly repulsive, looking like the Rotten from Dark Souls 2's younger brother. It's an incorporation of living matter which it just stuffs into its ever-shifting body to add to its mass. By doing so, it can rapidly infect those unlucky souls with the T-Virus and keep growing in size and strength. It's the ultimate embodiment of a virus, something looking to consume at a desperate measure, and for that reason, it's utterly terrifying. It's also inhumanely strong, and if you look closely, should you actually want to do that, then you'll be able to see that it's even absorbed a tyrant. So yeah, disgusting and powerful? What is this, my lacerating wit? Ew, awful. Number 7, Verdugo, Resident Evil 4. For many, Resident Evil 4 was a big shift from the out-and-out horror to a more action-oriented style. It was an absolutely brilliant game, but it was a big shake-up to the series. This led many to believe that the fear was going to be taken out of the game, but boy, were they wrong. Enter Verdugo, bodyguards to the pint-sized punk Salazar, and exit your spleen through your back should these walking monstrosities get a hand on you. When you first spy these lanky fellows, you can tell that something's up, but much like when your mum strips of the sailors down at the dock, it's only when they derobe do you see the true horrors. Also, that's my one per list. With their glowing eyes, huge imposing figure, and the fact that they run quicker than I do from my responsibilities, these buggy bastards are muddy pantaloon makers writ large. They can also hide in the vents and swipe at you from a distance, just for good measure. The first time that you face one of these guys is probably one of the most terrifying moments of the game, as not only is it nearly impossible to down it, but you're trapped waiting for a lift, which increases the stress no end. Number 6, Mama Mold, Resident Evil 7. So when you're playing a game primarily designed for VR, what's the first thing that you definitely like to be able to do? The answer is making sure that you can actually see what's hunting you. This is exactly the fear that Mama Mold plays on. This hairy beast can be found in the DLC minigame Not a Hero for the 7th official installment of the Resi series, and can be best described as a walking mop-headed puker hellbent on blinding you with its gross internals, kind of like Ash Millman is here on the gaming channel, really. When the big mama can't grab you and have a chew, she'll try and throw up on you from afar, blinding the player and making that VR experience oh so much more terrifying. And if that's not enough to keep you up at night, then she can also spawn these things, little crawlers which themselves are such a pain. And oh my god, they're in my hair, they're in my luxurious hair! Number 5, Sweeper, Resident Evil Code Veronica. So ask yourself, how do you make a giant mutated frog creature with claws as sharp as Josh Brown's dress sense and a hunger even greater than my own for t-shirt sales even more terrifying? Well, you make the damn things poisonous. Yes, hello Sweeper, we see you at the back there being a rascal. The Sweeper was a bioweapon designed to be dropped in after a battle to go along and hunt down all survivors, poisoning them or tearing them apart to make sure that there were no witnesses, or sweeping, as you might call it. However, just because these guys are at the tail end of a biological battle doesn't mean that they aren't at the forefront of why I'm up in the bed is wet. I swear it's sweat. I swear. If the design wasn't gross enough, it's the sheer fact that in Code Veronica, being poisoned was the same as me being given wet bread, because I'm not a duck and I don't like wet bread! Except a boggy brioche wouldn't kill me, and poison was definitely much harder to get rid of in this game. Number 4, Chimera, Resident Evil Remake. Okay, these things can positively get themselves into a bin, light themselves on fire, and then go into space. Why, oh why, would anyone think the idea of making a human-sized bug/spider hybrid with hooks for hands would be a good idea? Literally, what purpose do these things serve other than to get things off the shelves? But even then, if a Chimera had touched my malt wheaties, I'd be asking for a bloody discount. Scuttling on walls and on any surface they can get their hooks on, these annoying and ugly creatures swipe at you from a distance before racing away again. It's frustrating to fight them as their small size and quick, erratic movements mean that it can be hard to hit them, and these are truly the worst enemy to fight with those of a fear of insects. Hello. The backstory to these beasts is also truly grim, with their origin being that women were forcibly impregnated with embryos carrying insect DNA. This is definitely just a face that only a mother could shoot. Number 3, Bitores Mendez, Resident Evil 4. Okay, let's just get this one out of the way. Yes, I provided my likeness for this Resident Evil 4 character, Although, to be fair, I wouldn't actually mind his strength nor his size. I would, however, mind being a horrible centipede-esque horror who makes Doc Ock look like he's got rubber hoses strapped to his back in comparison, though. When you first meet Mendez, you know it's going to be a brilliant boss fight. He sells himself as a guy just itching for some chaos, and when you reveal his final horrifying form, it's suitably grandiose. It's also the moment that you realise that shooting him is like trying to butter a crumpet with a flip-flop, not very effective. And just when you think that you've toppled this meaty totem pole, he ditches his legs and swings about the rafters and then stabs you from above. It's a horror just to see him, but an even greater one to know that he's above you waiting to strike. Plus his parting gift to you is a horribly slimy eye. Brilliant, just what I wanted. Number 2, Crimson Head, Resident Evil Remake. Now, it might seem odd to place what appears to be just a regular zombie on this list after all the other beasts that we've seen, but these are no ordinary run-of-the-mill Watch Mojo fans, my friends. These are Crimson Heads, and these are goddamn terrifying. When a zombie or other bioweapon host body begins to die, either through being weighed down by bullets or some other issue, there's a chance that the T-virus will try to activate once more in order to get the body moving and infect another person. When it happens on a zombie, for example, you get crimson heads. So named because the heart pumps like the clappers, thus flushing them red with what's left of the host's blood. This sends the crimson heads into a pure, desperate rage as they will stop at nothing in their attempts to kill the survivors. They're faster, more erratic and tougher, so somehow the developers have made a way of making the much regarded and much feared monster like the zombie somehow even worse. Thanks. And number 1, Tyrant/Mr. X Resident Evil 2 Remake. Oh my bloody lord, who ordered the Mr. Clean Ultra Aggressive Edition? This man, who at first looks like a roll of damp toilet paper cosplaying as Rorschach from The Watchmen, is definitely not a laughing matter once you get to grips with him, or as might be more apt, when he gets to grips with you. In the original Resident Evil 2 game, this guy just looked like Neo from The Matrix had been on the protein shakes, but in this remake, he is bloody terrifying. His cold, unflinching stare and monstrous strength are all-encompassing, and when you hear those heavy stomp of his feet coming, you best be running the other way. In the remake, his aggression and speed have been dialed up, and he will always show up at the least convenient moments. It is a credit to the devs that his new stalking animation will scare you witless, but when you see what he can do with that bulk, you'll be sleeping with the lights on for months. And there we go, those were 10 more terrifying Resident Evil enemies that kept you up at night. Let me know what you thought about that down in the comments section below. So any other picks that you would have for your own personalised list, because I might revisit this one more time to do a commenters edition. And as always, I've been Jules. You can follow me at RetroJ with a 0 over on Twitter. You have been awesome, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye!